Unlocking the Soul, hosted by Rob Simperman and produced by Simplify Films. Episodes cover mature and controversial themes. Consider this when deciding whether and when to watch.
44. Possession, attachment, and thought forms. Now, it's easy for us humans to find external causes for our health problems, our addictions, our moral lapses, because that belief aligns very well with our ego's constant message that we should get credit for our success, but we should be able to blame others for our failings. Spiritualists, however, understand that we create our own reality, including what happens to us. We do this through free will, our beliefs, and as we'll hear today, how we deal with our emotions. But being skeptical about external forces doesn't disprove that perhaps there are energetic beings or energy devices that invade or attach to our auras, draining or hijacking our personal energy, or even possessing our bodies. Are such phenomena real? That's what I hope to figure out today. I'll even have excerpts from my own session with an energetic healer who dispels my preconceptions about the removal of energy attachments. You can find the full session on my channel as well. But, being an American, I think everything should start with bacon. No, not that bacon. Yes, that bacon. Kevin Bacon is an actor with a long history of creepy movies that influenced my childhood, from Friday the 13th to Flatliners to Stir of Echoes. But he recently explained a real-life impact that negative spirits had on his life. In a recent podcast interview with Rob Lowe, he told that in 1983, he wanted to buy an adjoining property to his. The neighbor first declined, but eventually agreed to sell only if Bacon agreed to destroy the house on the property in the first month after the purchase. Why, you ask? The neighbor said, "I can't sell it to you because it's haunted. I'm afraid that you'll get possessed and do some serious damage." Before destroying the house, Bacon took a look and suggested to his wife that they keep the beautiful wooden banister and some wall panels. But she shot back, "You're not putting those effing things in our house." But seriously, hadn't he seen any of his own movies? The idea of unwitting persons picking up an evil spirit by touching the wrong object is well known in human stories, even if Kevin Bacon surprisingly is not a believer himself. Does this happen in the real world? Meet Hari, a friend of mine for several years. He recently confided 2 relevant stories to me from his time living in India. Hari lived in the Kerala region of India before moving to the US. When he was in his 20s, he started seeing a dark figure in his bedroom every time he woke up. It would last up to 10 or so seconds and be as clear as day. A smaller black figure beside him, or moving about the room, or floating near him, even resting on top of him when he opened his eyes. He'd shout to his parents, who lived in the same house, but they could never see the figure, even while he still could. Other times it was a larger white figure rather than the smaller black one. This went on for about 2 years. Now, Hari refused to see the psychiatrist his parents suggested because he didn't feel like his mind was the problem, but he did agree to visit a local energy healer. This man never asked Hari what the issue was, nor was he told. But he laid his hands on Hari, and without any way he could have known, he explained to Hari and his father that he picked up the spirit of a young girl and an old man. It happened while taking a shortcut through a normally deserted patch of forest, inadvertently touching an object on the ground that these souls were attached to. The healer laid his hands on Hari again, presumably raising his vibration to such a frequency that the spirits could no longer attach. Hari never saw the figures after that day, even after many years have passed. Now, if that weren't interesting enough, there's also a famous temple called Chatankara. It's in a suburb of the city of Kochi, in the same region of India, Kerala, where Hari lived. In fact, Hari had visited this temple 3 times, personally. Why do I mention this? Because Chatankara is famous for performing exorcisms. Now, these aren't usually the full-blown demon removals you might know from American horror movies. These are done assembly line style by conducting a daily ritual called Garuthi Puja. Even though they're usually being dragged against their will for the ritual with the exorcist, there is typically still a long line of individuals with possessions, or bada as they call it. One step involves cutting hair off the head of the troubled person and nailing it to the central tree, signifying capturing the troubled spirit energy inside the temple. According to an interview with The Exorcist, this situation occurs when someone dies by suicide or violent death, and thus is having a hard time crossing over the threshold to the spirit world, looking for closure or moksha. For example, she told a story about a woman who lost consciousness while praying. And despite not knowing how to speak the Tamil language at all, she woke confused but speaking fluent Tamil, a difficult language to learn. After her exorcism, a few hours later, she had no recollection of the recent events and no more ability to speak Tamil. Now here's where the story gets even weirder. My friend Hari personally knew 3 possessed people throughout his childhood. Let that sink in for a moment. Can you imagine not only needing to get spirits expunged from your own life, and not only living near a temple with possessed people being dragged in to get exorcised, but knowing several schoolmates that were possessed? What's going on in Kerala is what I want to know. He described these friends of his as taking on the full personality of the lost soul for a week or more. One girl started smoking, which was unheard of among their friends, speaking like a man, and knowing things about a different lifetime that were actually verifiable. In fact, it was common for a possessed person to contact the loved ones of the deceased who would be convinced by the details their loved one was legitimately in that body. So what's the spiritualism theory behind these phenomena? And more importantly, what can one do for protection? Well, there are many energy healers out there claiming to be able to remove energy structures, parasites, and attachments. So I had no trouble finding an explanation. The understanding is that most people have one or more of these hindrances in their auric fields. These are immaterial beings or devices that appear in our energy field, leading to various personality changes and even causing physical diseases. What are we talking about here? Think of an energy attachment as a thought form, which are like ideas that become reality, even if only in the non-physical energy realms that we wade through. These beings or things have lost their connection to Source, or all that is, or God if you prefer. So in order to continue to exist, they attach to us and live vicariously through us and absorb our energy. They may feed from our chakras, which are the points of energy flow among our various energy bodies to our physical body. And energy attachments thrive on a negative and polluted energy field. This happens when we don't let our emotions run their course. We bottle them up or suppress them instead of honoring them. In that sense, it's like how a fast-moving stream is fairly clean, but a stagnant pond has all sorts of things growing in it until it looks almost like a solid mass. But they also thrive when a person gives into negative, pessimistic thoughts, gossip, stress, depression, anxiety, fear, and addiction. Let's look for some guidance from Guy Needler, author of numerous books, including The History of God, and a channel who I had the opportunity to interview a few weeks ago. Needler's Source Entity Conversations reported that there are in fact lower frequency entities, and these entities will cease to exist on Earth when we ascend at the planetary level. Therefore, they have an incentive to prevent our ascension. And so they antagonize those who work for the ascension of our evolution. They also are attaching themselves to hosts to experience the lives of low-frequency humans. These are lost souls roaming the Earth, looking for hosts they can latch onto like energy parasites. So what are some signs of attachments? According to an organization called Solancha that offers resources on this topic and therapies, some of the more interesting categories of external energy parasites and the etheric or vital plane include larval parasites. These beings reside alongside or in the aura. Their method of attack is to suck your energy through the stimulation of your desires. There's sexual larvae that absorb the energy of your sexual release, then they switch back into a passive phase until the next mealtime. Other such similar parasites focus on smoking, gambling, drugs, etc. There's also a higher class feeder beyond the larval stage, which includes beings such as incubus, succubus, and the lamius. These are more aggressive, engaging people in their dreams or even during waking trances to actively initiate encounters for the energy feeding needs. And then there's the shell of the dead type parasites, which most closely resembles what Hari experienced. This is a being that requires energy from the living to exist, taking the form of a person who has passed. They also operate through dreams and can be pretty aggressive, even attacking the host during a dream. Then there's astral parasites that stimulates a certain emotion in you, such as anxiety. If you feed the emotion and sustain it through your thoughts, the parasite takes that emotional energy. This supports the meditation concept of letting emotions go as a way of raising your frequency. Now, there's more varieties, but I think you get the picture. And from what I gather, parasites can be anywhere on the spectrum of strength and abilities, perhaps even reaching the full-blown possessions of lore. But frankly, that's all a distraction. What I learned from my own energy healer session is that healers are actually getting frustrated by this misconception that most energetic problems are external beings. In fact, most are thought forms of our own making, which can be only addressed with self-help and the hard work of dealing with our emotions instead of bottling them up. "45. Understanding energetic attachments." Now, I'm not brand new to energy work. I've had acupuncture a couple dozen times. I've been to a Reiki healer once. I've had multiple past life regression sessions, and I even did a Qigong workshop once. But in this case, I sought out someone who's a professional focused on energy attachment clearing. So let's hear from Barbara Buck, who I hired to do an energy session with me. I picked Barbara out of Eugene, Oregon, as an energy healer whose credentials looked stellar. I signed up for the multidimensional light body clearing phone session. At first, she's reluctant to do any quote-unquote entity clearing because she explains how people looking for a quick fix to physical issues, like so many of her recent clients, can find such work ineffective, at least in the long run, or even counterproductive. Let's hear her explain why.
Here's the trend. So a third of people, do an entity removal and everything goes really well and they go on their merry way. You never see them again, or maybe you do if they have an issue for something else. And then there's a third of people who you work on them and you're able to clear them, but it always comes back. And then a third of the people are just completely unclearable. So I started looking like just nobody. They go to 50, 60 different healers and nobody can touch anything. So we started really looking at, and me as well, started really looking at why this is happening. And we noticed some things and started to recognize that the majority of interference that people have that are entity attachments and things like that are self-created thought forms, because you got to understand these are not happening in the material realm in this dimension. They're happening in a non-local dimension that consists of thought forms, and it's a creation space. So sometimes those thought forms are your own, sometimes those thought forms are somebody else's, but they're always a thought form. So the more you feed into the thought forms by making them real in a sense, meaning like me focusing my energy on clearing a thing actually almost solidifies sometimes the interference itself and makes it even worse. So other people have had that experience as well. Not all the time. And the reason it's not all the time is because it has to do with the person's mindset going into it and what they want to accomplish. So if somebody goes into a clearing who's so sold on the fact that these are 100% an external force, and yes, sometimes it is an external force, but most of the time it's thought forms that are either self-created or that are created within your morphic field of family, ancestral. It's like a super complex thing. It's not just about pulling entities off somebody and then they go on their merry way. That just doesn't happen that often. meaning, yes, I can pull them off. Do they stay off? Not always. And it started to get kind of frustrating because we started getting all of these people, and I say we, meaning other people who do the same type of work as me. We all talk to each other. We all know each other. And it started getting frustrating because there started to be more and more people who were kind of unclearable and going from healer to healer to healer, and none of us were really able to fully help them. So we started finding all of these reasons and going deeper into the reasons of why these attachments happen to begin with. And it's always based on a person's trauma, how they handle their emotional state. Are they able to let emotions move through their body? Do they have all this compressed emotional energy? There's like all of these different things that go into it. So I stopped doing entity removals because it doesn't heal anybody. It just temporarily gets rid of a problem. There's like deeper issues of why a person is having it happen to begin with. And then when you get into the whole thing where you have like a reptilian interference and non-human interference and things like that, that's a whole other can of worms because there's a big agenda that happens. So again, you can clear a thing temporarily, but you can't get rid of it all the way. And so people have to go through this process of evolution and getting their energy field really strong and empowering themselves to the point of where nothing else supersedes their own energy in their own energetic space. And that can't happen in just an etheric clearing.
So how do attachments happen? Emotions are the key factor. Repressing our emotions, as we're experts at, can cause old emotions to congeal in both our body and our energy field. The energy that comes from an emotion needs release. Ignoring it, not letting it run its course, causes a blockage in the energy field, like sludge clogging up the kitchen drain if you pour too much grease down it. According to Salancha, every conflict we have been involved in during our lives has provoked aura breakdowns and outflows of energy from the chakras. It is this state of energy that attracts energy parasites to us, which easily stick to various organs of our bodies and chakras. When the parasite begins to suck the energy out of us, we start feeling fatigued, apathy, lack of motivation and inspiration, pessimism, etc. Then, if the parasite is not removed, the organ on which the parasite lives begins to suffer from energy deficiency and accordingly begins to hurt. Now, during my work with Ms. Buck, I focused on my numerous health issues centered around my throat area. I've had minor swallowing difficulty for decades, acid reflux for years. I had a fishbone stuck in my esophagus while on vacation just last month. And last week, I went to the doctor for a new unexplained throat pain. Apparently, emotions that stick in the throat relate to feeling unheard, unable to express. But that hadn't previously resonated with me. However, she helped me revisit my childhood feelings of frustration during my parents' divorce, feeling pulled between two sides of an argument, defending each to the other. And I realized that perhaps those unresolved emotions are now manifesting as issues around my throat. Let's listen.
Sure, we can take a look at it, but there's also going to be a deeper issue there. And usually when you have around the throat area, quite often it's about suppression of your voice in some way, and or suppression of you not being in alignment with your avatar self, your fifth dimensional blueprint, which is kind of like a perfect version of you. Intentions, actions, words being in complete alignment. It's really hard to be fully in alignment all the time. But if for some reason you're kind of off track in what your mission is or what the reason that you came here, sometimes you can start to have throat issues. I personally have Graves' disease. It's been in remission for like 13 years, but it causes hyperthyroidism, so it's a thyroid disease. So I'm speaking from no judgment. And I kept having issues with my throat as well before that. You know, I was always getting sore throats, strep throat, you name it, until it finally manifested in this physical disease. And then I had to do all this work to get rid of it. So for me, it was Nobody heard me. Nobody listened to me when I was little. I just got treated like a little child. Nobody heard me or heard my needs or heard my no. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, that was mine. So I don't know if any of that resonates with you, but that can usually be an issue. Maybe a throat stuff.
Yeah, and I've heard that before as like a cause of like a blockage of the throat chakra. I hadn't thought about the childhood side of it.
It's not about the chakra. It's about where we hold stored emotional energy. So if you have a repression of your voice in any way, it can create emotional issues, meaning it'll cause an emotion. If somebody tells you to shut up enough times or just shut you up in some way to where you can't speak your truth in some way for whatever reason, whether you're doing it to yourself or it was done to you, it causes emotions to come up to surface. And if those emotions aren't allowed to have a beginning and a middle and an end, then eventually what happens is it ends up manifesting as disease. And then also entity attachments, the only way that they can attach is through dense, compacted pieces of your energy field that are like little pieces of you frozen in time. That compressed emotional energy that gets kind of stuffed down. So this can even happen like with anger, if you're not allowed to express anger or sadness, or, even nice parents, and they try to comfort you to stop you from feeling a certain negative emotion. That in a way is suppression too, because it's not honoring how you're feeling. So that being said, that is what entities attach to. It's the only way they're able to attach into your field. They can't attach to moving, living liquid light. They can only attach to light that's not moving, meaning old emotional blocks and things like that. Does this make sense?
It does, yeah. And you actually are making me think about some childhood memories that could be related through my parents' divorce and all. Huh.
Yeah, and you didn't get a say in any of that, and as children, we don't get to kind of choose what happens to us. There's no consent really when it comes to a lot of things, right? Life happens around us and it can be very disturbing, especially if you're a sensitive person. So yeah, especially when there's a divorce, there's probably a lot of stuff going on before that was unpleasant or uncomfortable.
46. Removing energetic attachments. You first have to understand an important point. Anyone can clear energy attachments from their etheric body on their own by letting the energy flow and making a hostile environment for these thought forms and the so-called negative energy entities. This includes positive emotions, high-frequency behaviors, and other self-work. If you have something negative residing in your throat, the goal is to flush it out, let it go. And you can also try to raise the frequency of your voice and your communications. Try practicing singing or humming, chanting Om, and avoiding negative communications like swearing and gossip. But many people are stuck in negative energy feedback loops. In fact, such a loop is encouraged by your habits, emotions, and any attached beings. So they may need some assistance to break free. That's where an energetic cleansing comes in, to give you a jump start on your introspection and work. So let's hear a little more about releasing emotions. Now I'm 47 years old. What do you do with such a root cause?
Yeah, first let's do some good old energy work and just get stuff that may not be yours out of your field. And also sometimes it's enough to go in and do some energy work and clear it. There's also an appointment that I have called, it's called emotional mastery, but basically what that is it teaches you a way of going in and getting and finding compacted emotional energy in your body, because your body has wisdom. So you can find energy in your body, meaning like where it can be stored on an energetic level, but it's also stored on a physical level and on a cellular level, right? So we have cellular memory as well. And you can store it in the mind as well as in the unconscious. So there's a bunch of places you can store it. The easiest way to do it is by getting the body to tell you where stuff is. So we go through this process that I walk you through. I teach you how to do it. I help you with the energetic component of it until you get comfortable with it. And it's something that you can do for yourself. It helps you to find triggers, emotional triggers. Those triggers are those blocks of energy that entity is attached to. So this is like a key piece of keeping yourself clear of energies it's one of them anyway, is by learning how to feel a feeling without compressing energy, which is a weird thing to say, but most of us, we kind of stuff down feelings, or we don't want to feel them. So we're not in the body when we're having a negative emotional experience because it's uncomfortable, unpleasant. Or we'll try to stuff it down in a bunch of video games, watching movies, smoking a joint, whatever. Just stuffing it down, doing something else, looking at our phone, going on Facebook. So it's important to kind of learn how to feel your feelings, and they get gone a lot faster, so that you don't create any new emotional blocks for any new energies to mess with.
She also provided me with 3 guided meditations. These are about strengthening your gold light energy, getting it flowing, and combining the masculine gold energy with the feminine silver energy in your field. I found these positive and have done them with my family as well. So in conclusion, we heard Miss Buck explain the energetic self is a reflection of the physical and vice versa, and that attachment removal does not always go smoothly, even when the attachment is a manifestation of our own emotions, because the root causes are often deep and complex. But when a host or a healer recognizes an external presence, they get angry. Hence, the upset people being dragged to the temple. But as the source entity told Guy Needler, these beings are truly afraid, and often they can't understand what's happening to them. Quote, to send them into the light, all you have to do is invoke the Christ or God consciousness to protect yourself. Then give them lots of love and send them back to the light by giving them the energy to do so. This may be what Hari's healer did, and some form of the ritual performed at the temple. So the biggest takeaways are that it's important to understand that receiving an etheric cleansing isn't the end to your healing journey. It might help, but if you want to stay clear, a basic understanding of how energy can attach to you is important, as well as doing regular self-help work around your emotional processing. The most basic step is to honor your emotions and let them run their course, beginning, middle, and end. And even emotions from decades ago may be waiting for their opportunity for release. Next, take a look at what are some other factors holding us back from raising our frequency. Let's ask Maureen St. Germain for more on this.
And in your book, you talk about some environmental factors that hold people back from ascension, like genetically modified food, fluoridated water, Wi-Fi in the airwaves. Can you expand on that a little more?
Let's start with fluoridated water. That is an original plan to sanitize the water. And at the time it was invented and used, it probably was a big solution to a problem. But we don't need that anymore because we have other ways to purify our water. And fluoridation causes the pineal gland to calcify. If your pineal gland is full of calcium, you cannot use it to connect to source. So it stands in the way of your progress. So that's the first thing. We don't need fluoridated water anymore. Most people who are on ascension path go out of their way to avoid fluoridated water. But here's the thing. Dentists, all dental products are fluoridated. So my approach is you're going to get fluoride no matter what. And, if you go to the dentist, and most people do, there's a few exceptions, you're going to get, I'll call it, a load up of fluoride. So you choose to do something about it. You take something that will help decalcify the pineal. With regard to GMO food, we don't know what GMO food will do because we have not had a generation of humans who have been eating GMO foods. We don't have history to prove that that is not a problem. The other thing is there's a mixing of genes at a different level that is causing certain things to happen that in the early analysis doesn't look good. And I'm relying on science on that. I'm not just tuning in. And the third thing is this is totally a tune in for me. But because I'm so sensitive, I can feel Wi-Fi. I can feel when it's turned up. I can feel when it's at a higher frequency. And when I say higher, I don't mean higher in frequency. I mean higher in volume, higher in pushing out, because the push out of Wi-Fi is different in different locations, and it's different in different homes, and it's also different in different subdivisions, depending upon how many kids are playing on video games. And okay, so that's the setup. And then from my guides, I clearly got that we are being broadcast fear energy. So anything we're afraid of, we get more afraid of. And then there's two other things that are predominant on all forms of wireless communication, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's Wi-Fi in your home or in, your office. And it also comes over the TV waves. And those two things are forget, 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 reject, reject, reject. So you learn something that opens you up, but then you forget about it. So even the people who are attempting to open themselves up are finding this.
So what I don't hear you saying is that there's any conspiracy or government influence that's trying to prevent people from ascending to a fifth density life.
Doesn't matter who is responsible. What matters is we don't want it. If we care about who's doing it, then we've fallen into their game, and it keeps us locked into polarity. Anytime we move into judgment about something, it drops us back into 3D. And see, what people don't understand, and this is a very profound statement, this was channeled by one of the masters that I work with. I think it was Sana Kumar, but I don't remember. I remember the message, but I don't necessarily remember who gave it to me. He said, the game is over, referring to no more karma. Okay? That game is over. So we're moving from, let's say, football to soccer. The rules are different. They look similar. If you see a bunch of people on a playing field, looks like a football field to me. So the game is over. The game will end when there are no more players. Will you be the first to leave or the last?